One of the reasons I've always enjoyed science fiction is that it contains such imaginative scenarios. Authors often set their stories in exotic, intriguing alternate worlds where the storyteller can explore how life might play out if the universe were different from our own reality in some key way. People who study such literature for a living might tell us the reason this sort of thing is interesting to read is that we actually learn something about what it means to live in this universe when we see it contrasted with an invented one. Whatever the reason, I find it fascinating to experiment with creative thinking about how our existence would be different if some facet of the world were changed. In fact, I'd like to do it right now. Let's go on a little imaginative journey through an alternate world. What if, for instance, what if we lived in a world where politicians were sometimes dishonest and selfish? Imagine that. I know this seems far-fetched, but what if not everyone in charge could be trusted all the time to be looking out for our well-being? You know, imagine, I know this sounds ridiculous, but imagine if the people who sought after power and authority sometimes were driven primarily by the desire for power and authority. Could you conceive of what it must be like to live in such a world? A world where you couldn't just put somebody in charge and then walk away and forget about it because that person might be motivated actually by greed or some other dishonorable purpose, might be willing to abuse power and trample you under it for his or her own gain. Note the cleverly sticky trouble we'd be in if we lived in such a world. Obviously, government is a place of power, and power is a means of getting your own way, and so corrupt, self-serving people would flock to it. It wouldn't be an occasional thing, but a constant one. We'd have so many untrustworthy people inundating our elections that we'd have no choice but to recognize that even in the midst of all the other dangers and problems that our government protects us from, government also is a source of potential danger to us, maybe the most consistent one of all. But thankfully, the real world isn't like that, right? The history of the real world isn't chock full from beginning to end of tyranny, oppression, corruption, and all manner of abuses of power, right? In the real world, as soon as someone puts on a uniform or takes an oath of office, he or she is transformed by magic into someone with purest motives and perfect integrity. Right? Of course not. We know this is not true. And so what does it mean when these people wish to watch us at all times? They say that if I'm not doing anything wrong, I have nothing to fear, and I say they're right, but they have neglected to mention that whoever is currently in power gets to define doing something wrong however they like. And history demonstrates conclusively that to the politically minded, ambitious, self-serving people we regularly find in charge, doing something wrong often consists of nothing more than voting against them, dissenting from their political agenda, or getting in the way of their individual ambition or financial gain. It has been said, when I have complained about blanket surveillance, that the government cares nothing about my personal life, that they are collecting my data only to find and respond to security threats. But the reality is that people with the power to spy on other people will do so in reaction to all threats, and that includes political ones. If you're in charge, you have a strong incentive to monitor anyone who threatens your power. In other words, powerful persons do have an interest in your personal affairs whenever your personal affairs include opposition to those people. This isn't just some far-fetched, abstract worry. Every one of the laws restricting the government from spying on its own citizenry is there because it has proven necessary in our actual experience of real leaders. It starts with the Bill of Rights, written by people who had recent experience without one. But this is not something we can dismiss as an outdated concern from centuries ago either. In living memory, the President of the United States has had to resign his office due to abuses of the very same kind of powers we're talking about here. Incredibly enough, today another president is apparently surprised to find that we don't automatically trust him with tools 10,000 times as powerful. The executive should be allowed to police himself, we are to understand. This is more than a little ironic, coming from a man whose presidency is only possible because of the hard work of civil rights activists who consistently suffered under politically motivated government surveillance and interference. In pursuit of his dream, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was harassed every step of the way by an FBI who watched his every move, listened to his every call, and noted his every personal association. There is simply no way to come to any conclusion other than this. Human beings, when given the ability to conduct mass surveillance, can be counted on to use it with great regularity to undermine and defeat those who stand in their way. So here's the deal you get. You can only say you don't care about mass surveillance if you are willing to promise you will never in your life take a political stand in opposition to whoever holds power at that time. If your life plans never include standing for anything, good for you. Thanks for committing to a meaningless life and enjoy that. If, however, you want to preserve your right and the right of your neighbors and the right of your children to stand for things freely and fearlessly, and to associate with others who do too. If you wish to preserve the right to differ with and attempt to defeat your elected officials when you think they're in the wrong, then it is vitally important that we turn back the buildup of this kind of power. For it is utter foolishness to expect that we can hand people the tools of totalitarianism and somehow will expect that they will never be used for that. The Fourth Amendment disallows unrestricted general warrants for a reason. When we recognize this, when we understand that permission to search through a person's papers and effects is not merely a benign privilege that will be used only by the pure of heart, but is a potentially dangerous power that can also be used for evil, then we can understand the fullness of why the notion of balancing privacy against security is so utterly wrong-headed. Because privacy is a form of security. We are not wrong to seek protection from danger, but there is more than one danger in the world. It is not just personal discomfort that brings us here today. It is a real threat to freedom when people holding power have the ability to watch everything and listen to every word spoken by those who oppose them. I hope that you and I can work together to eliminate this danger, to fulfill our duty as vigilant stewards of the liberty we have inherited and pass it on, alive and healthy, to another generation.